silent pain and God's gentle presence. There are certain kinds of pain that never announce themselves. They slip in quietly, like fog rolling through the soul. You carry them in silence, those unspoken wounds, invisible to the world, but etched deep in your heart like permanent echoes. You smile, go about your day, perform the roles life has assigned, yet inside, something has splintered. Something's breaking, but without a sound. And maybe you've asked in those long, aching moments, where are you, God? Not in anger, not even in despair, just in weariness. Do you see me? Do you hear this silent unraveling happening inside? He does. You need to know this. God was there. He is still here. He never turned away, never flinched from your pain. He didn't cause your wound. He didn't write your betrayal, but he saw it coming. And even as it unfolded, even when the silence felt unbearable, he stood by you. We often imagine divine presence as loud, burning bushes, parting seas, booming voices from heaven. But more often, God comes quietly. He doesn't storm in to erase what broke you. Instead, he enters it. He steps into the very soil of your suffering and whispers, "This is not the end of your story." Because what tried to break you is exactly what he plans to use. That broken ground you thought was your grave, it's where he's planting something holy. God remembers every detail you've been through. Let's talk about memory, not yours, but God's. He remembers. He remembers the night you couldn't sleep, when your thoughts ran in circles like a storm you couldn't quiet. He remembers the moment you forced a smile because no one noticed the cracks. The day you showed up even when you were empty. The conversation where you laughed on the outside while your heart was breaking silently. God didn't forget those moments. And maybe most importantly, he didn't overlook the ones where you shut down completely. When you couldn't find strength to pray. When worship felt like pretending. When trying again seemed too heavy. In those moments, you weren't faithless, you were human. And God wasn't disappointed. He was protective. He didn't abandon you to the numbness. He stood guard over your soul like a shepherd keeping watch in the night. When you lost the will to fight, he fought for you in the unseen realm. Not with pressure, but with presence. Not with demands, but with defense. You didn't have to hold it all together for him to stay. You just had to survive, and you did. But more than that, he carried the trembling version of you that no one else saw. The one who cried behind closed doors. The one who felt forgotten. That version, that's the one he held most closely. God doesn't discard what's been broken. He doesn't require wholeness before he moves. In fact, your brokenness was the invitation. He stepped into it not to relive your pain, but to repurpose it. What if the worst night of your life is the ground where grace grows roots? What if the pain that made you feel most disqualified is the very thing that qualifies you to carry comfort, to speak wisdom, to become a safe place for someone else? This isn't about performing for healing. It's about knowing you were held all along. Pain doesn't disqualify, it equips. We've been taught to fear pain, to run from it, to hide it. But what if pain isn't the end? What if pain is preparation? You see, pain doesn't reduce your worth. It refines your depth. It equips you with empathy, not emptiness. It teaches you to listen differently, to feel more deeply, to walk gently through a world that's constantly shouting. And God sees that in you, not just the damage, but the strength it revealed. You've walked through things others forgot, but God never did. People may have moved on. The world doesn't always remember the nights you barely made it, the sacrifices that left you empty, or the tears no one asked about. But he remembers. He kept count of every tear. He measured every sigh, and he's turning them into seeds. This is the paradox of the kingdom. The very thing that hurt you may be the place where your greatest impact begins. Those cracks in you, they aren't flaws to be hidden. They're entry points for God's light and someone else's healing. Think about it. Who do you trust to walk with you in suffering? Not the one who's never struggled. Not the perfect voice. You trust the one with scars, the one who knows, the one who's been there. That's what pain gave you. Not a label of weakness, but a legacy of understanding. You are becoming that person. God isn't interested in polishing you up for display. He's shaping you for purpose. And purpose doesn't come from applause. It comes from alignment. With Him, with truth, with your true self, no longer afraid of the story you carry. So what if your pain wasn't punishment, but preparation? What if your wounds aren't the end, but the beginning? Because in the kingdom of God, pain never has the last word. Purpose does. Not a return, but a rebuilding. Sometimes we look back on our pain and think, if only we could go back. Back to the version of us before the heartbreak, before the betrayal, before everything changed. But what if the invitation isn't to go back, but to build something new? You're still breathing. You're still here. That alone is not small. That is evidence, sacred evidence, that your story isn't over. And not just that, it's evolving. See, rebuilding isn't about recreating who you used to be. It's not about pretending the cracks aren't there or masking over the wear. It's about constructing something stronger, something more aligned with who you truly are, now that the illusions have fallen away. You may think strength looks like loud declarations, unshakable certainty, spiritual fire on display. But I want you to reconsider that. Sometimes the deepest strength is found in the quietest moment, the whisper of, "Help me, God," uttered when no one else is listening. That kind of faith doesn't need applause. That kind of faith can rebuild a life. Because real strength doesn't come from pretending you weren't affected. It comes from acknowledging what happened and choosing to live anyway. Rebuilding requires honesty. It requires endurance. It asks you to sit with what remains and ask, what can grow here now? Not everything that was lost needed to come with you. Some things had to collapse so the foundation could be revealed. You've been taught to fear the breaking. But maybe, just maybe, the breaking was the blessing in disguise. Not because it didn't hurt, but because it revealed what could never be taken. Your will to rise, your capacity to love, your quiet decision to keep waking up. And that is the place God begins again with what remains. Not with your old strength, but with the steady breath that says, "I'm still willing." God heals to send you. You've probably asked the question at some point, "What now, God? What do I do with all this pain?" That kind of question doesn't come from weakness. It comes from the ache of someone who has lived through the fire and is trying to make sense of the ashes. And God's answer might not be what you expect. He doesn't say, hide it. He doesn't say, forget it. He says, use it. Not recklessly, not performatively, but intentionally. Maybe your healing is not meant to be hoarded. Maybe it's meant to be poured out in your presence, in your forgiveness, in your storytelling, in your art, in your listening. Healing becomes holy when it is shared. You don't have to wait until you're completely better to be useful. In fact, God often moves most powerfully through people who are still in process. Why? Because there's no pretending there. Just honesty, just openness, just a heart still beating, still trusting, still saying yes, even if it's through tears. What once shamed you may become the very evidence of grace. What once silenced you may become the very truth that sets someone else free. It's not your perfection that draws others in, it's your presence, your authenticity, the fact that you still showed up even when you didn't feel whole, the fact that you didn't let the pain close your heart forever. And this isn't just about personal redemption, it's about purpose, real lived out costly purpose, because God doesn't waste pain. He transforms it into power, not the kind that dominates, but the kind that heals. So ask again, what now, God? And listen, his response might sound like, now you go. Go in your truth. Go in your cracks. Go in your story. And let me flow through every part you thought was too broken to be useful. Restoration is not a return, it's a resurrection. Here's something no one tells you. Healing won't make you the same. But maybe that's the point. You're not being called to recover the exact person you once were. That person was beautiful, but they didn't yet know what you know now. They hadn't carried what you've carried. They hadn't felt what you've felt. They hadn't lost what you've lost, or grown the way you have. So no, you're not going back. You're moving forward. And that forward movement requires something sacred, resurrection. But resurrection always comes with death. Not just physical, but emotional, relational, spiritual. Something had to die in you. An illusion, a false hope, a relationship you thought would last forever, a version of yourself you tried to preserve. And now what rises is real. What rises is a soul with deeper roots. Restoration is not putting the old puzzle pieces back together. It's God giving you a new picture entirely and saying, this is who you are now. And that's a good thing. It's not the same joy, it's wiser joy. Not the same dreams, they're deeper. It's not naive hope, but seasoned, weathered, tested hope. And hope like that, it lasts. And here's the most important part. Your healing doesn't just restore you, it radiates outward. It gives permission for others to hope again. It becomes a signpost that says you can get through it too. So no, restoration isn't a return. It's a resurrection. It's the rising of someone who knows who they are now. Someone who's not trying to perform or earn or prove, but simply live, rooted, open, transformed. You're not trying to reclaim what was. You're carrying what remains, and what remains is enough. From survivor to messenger. Let's be honest, surviving alone already feels like a miracle, doesn't it? Making it through what you never imagined you'd face. Waking up after nights you thought would break you. Carrying on when everything inside you screamed, stop. That takes courage. That takes something most people never see. And yet, survival was never the final chapter. It was just the turning point. There's a quiet moment after the chaos ends when God starts peeling back the lies you picked up along the way. Lies that crept in while you were trying to survive. Lies that whispered, you're too broken. You're too weak. You missed your chance. You're not worthy anymore. But those voices, they weren't truth. They were grief disguised as logic. And God doesn't speak through fear. He speaks through love, through clarity, through the calm after the storm. God never called the polished, the perfect, the praised. He called the open-hearted, the willing, the surrendered. Look through the stories of Scripture. Moses, who stuttered, David, who fell, Peter, who denied. And yet they were chosen. Not after they cleaned themselves up, but in the raw mess of their humanity. Why? Because God sees past appearances. He sees hunger. He sees openness. He sees you. You've walked through fire. And no, you didn't come out unscathed, but you came out refined. You didn't shine because the storm was easy. You shine now because you stayed through it. You didn't abandon the process. You stayed when you didn't understand, didn't feel strong, didn't feel spiritual. And that is what God honors. So now, He's not just restoring your life. He's giving it meaning. You're not a case study in pain. You're a living letter of hope. Your story carries power, not because it's clean, but because it's real. And real is what this world is desperate for. You are becoming someone who brings healing by simply being who you are, someone who made it through, someone who chose mercy over bitterness, tenderness over numbness, purpose over pain. That kind of person doesn't need a stage, just a heart willing to say, yes, I'm still here. I still believe. Use me. And God will. A new season, moved by alignment, not effort. You're stepping into something new now. And it feels different, doesn't it? Not frantic, not forced, not the pressure to prove anything, but a quiet invitation to align. The old you may have chased approval, fought for space in rooms where you felt unseen, pushed through exhaustion to keep up. But this new season doesn't work that way. Not anymore. God isn't calling you to run harder. He's calling you to walk wiser. Because what really brings transformation isn't speed, it's surrender. It's not about doing more, it's about being in step with the one who knows exactly where you're going. Alignment with him is where peace is. It's where purpose finds oxygen. It's where your life begins to echo heaven, not because you're performing, but because you're present. And maybe this time, you're not carrying answers, but presence. Maybe what God is doing in you isn't meant to look impressive, but restful. Maybe your very stillness is what will calm someone else's storm. You don't need to rebuild your life around hustle. You're not behind. You're not late. You're exactly where he needs you to be. And here's the beauty. People will find rest through you, not because you say the right things, but because you carry what they long for. A grounded spirit, a quiet confidence, a life that flows, not forces. And it's not because you've figured it all out. It's because you've been with God in the quiet, and it shows. This isn't about going back. This isn't about reclaiming lost time. This is about walking in rhythm, slow, steady, sacred. And when you move in alignment, impact happens naturally. Not with noise, but with weight. Not with hype, but with truth. And this world doesn't need more noise. It needs more anchors. You are becoming one, living as one who was sent. This is not just recovery. It's a rebirth. You're not just someone who made it out. You're someone who's called through it. God isn't placing you back where you used to be. He's calling you forward with purpose shaped by pain and grace shaped by fire. You are not simply surviving anymore. You're living, fully, boldly, sent, not as a performer, but as a carrier of presence. Because what once tried to silence you is now the very place your voice will echo loudest. What once broke you is now where others will find healing through your story. And what once made you feel disqualified has now become the very evidence of God's redemption. You don't need to explain how you made it through. Just be. Let the strength in your silence speak. Let the steadiness in your steps testify. Let the scars remain visible, not as shame, but as proof that love stayed, even when everything else left. You're not here because life was easy. You're here because grace was relentless. And now it's time to live like it. No more shrinking. No more wondering if you belong. No more apologizing for surviving. You are sent. You are steady. You are sacred. And you carry something this world needs. Truth that's been lived, not just learned. So walk, not in performance, not in pressure, but in peace, in presence, in purpose. The page is turning. The chapter is shifting. And this time, you're not asking for permission. You're walking with authority. Because the same God who kept you in the fire is now walking with you in the light. Let your life tell the story. You're not just loved. You're chosen. You still belong here. And the world is ready for the version of you that rose. Quiet invitation to remember. Have you ever woken up and for a brief second before your mind began its usual chatter, felt something different? Not anxiety, not worry, but something softer. A whisper you couldn't quite name. It's like the light through the window was speaking. Like the morning itself had a voice, and it was calling your name. You didn't just wake up today because your alarm went off or your body clock said so. No, you woke up because you were meant to. Your breath, right now is not leftover. It's not spare. It's not accidental. It's intentional. A gift. And more than that, it's a sign. A sign that today, this specific day, is not just another loop on the calendar. There's something sacred about it. You're not here randomly. You're not an extra in someone else's story. You are here in this moment on purpose. You belong. And before your mind pushes back, before it starts questioning your worth, your productivity, your pace, pause. There is joy in the air. Not the loud, performative kind. Not the plastic smile you've learned to wear. But the kind of joy that hums quietly underneath the fatigue. The kind that comes when your soul senses something holy is near. That God hasn't left. That He's still here. Still whispering. Still inviting. And maybe that's why you're here now. Not just listening with your ears, but with a deeper part of you that's been aching to remember. You still belong here. You are still chosen. It's a strange thing, the pressure we put on ourselves to be okay, to keep showing up strong, to not let anyone see the cracks. But what if the cracks weren't the problem? What if the parts of you that feel the weakest are the very places God wants to meet you? He's not waiting for your faith to be as strong as it once was. He's not looking for proof of your perfection, your productivity, or your spiritual performance. He's offering something simpler. Something deeper, His peace. Right now, in the middle of your uncertainties, God is not expecting you to climb your way back to Him. He's coming to you. He always has. And He wants you to know this chapter, this strange season you're in, isn't a detour or a delay. It's not a punishment. It's part of the story. Yes, even the quiet parts, even the slow parts, even the tired, uncelebrated days where you feel like you're just existing. Because in His eyes, nothing is wasted. No step, no tear, no effort that no one saw. He doesn't love you for your usefulness. He delights in your presence. You waking up today, you turning your heart, even slightly, toward Him. That was enough. He sees that miracle, and He honors it. So don't believe the lie that you've been benched, forgotten, or disqualified. You're not losing value with time. You're ripening, becoming more rooted, more radiant, and it has nothing to do with applause. You don't need to shine like others. You just need to stay connected. He is the vine. You are the branch. If you remain in Him, not strive, not perform, not hustle, but simply remain, you will bear fruit. Not maybe. Not if. You will. You are not replaceable. Let's get something clear. This isn't about going back. Not to the person you used to be. Not to the version of yourself that you barely recognize anymore. The one that always had the answers, the plans, the energy. This is about who you are now. Right now. Scars and all. Maybe slower. Maybe softer. Maybe less sure of what comes next. But no less chosen. God didn't pick you because of your speed. He didn't anoint you because of your resume. He doesn't need your title or your stage. He just needs your yes. And that yes, even if whispered through exhaustion, even if hesitant, still holds power. You are still the one He's chosen to carry His light into this generation. Not someone flashier, not someone younger. You. And it doesn't matter if the platform is gone, or if no one sees you. The presence of God isn't limited to performance. It's carried in the quiet willingness to show up, to love, to serve, to try again. Your worth was never tied to your title. It was never dependent on recognition. It was always written into your being. Even if the world forgot, He didn't. Even if you stopped expecting to be included, He never stopped expecting you. And yes, you are still needed. Not as a shadow of your past self, but as the truest version you've become through all you've walked through. You still belong here. The subtle voice that tries to deceive. Sometimes the most dangerous lies don't come as screams. They come as whispers. Soft, reasonable, dressed in what we call realism. They say things like, maybe your season has passed. Maybe you've already given all you had. Maybe you've already missed your window, and it's too late now. They don't sound evil at first. In fact, they often feel familiar, like our own voice echoing back to us. They're laced with exhaustion and weariness, so we let them in. We even start to believe their wisdom. But what if I told you that voice isn't God's? God doesn't speak in accusations. He doesn't guide by shame. He doesn't motivate through guilt. That voice, the one that says you're no longer valuable, that you've become invisible, that your best days are behind you, that is not the voice of your Creator. That is the quiet echo of fear pretending to be maturity. It is discouragement wrapped in humility. And if you let it linger too long, it rewrites your self-perception. And here's the thing. Lies are most dangerous when they sound just close enough to the truth. But God speaks differently. When He calls, you don't shrink. You breathe. When He reminds you of who you are, it doesn't sting, it awakens. Ask yourself this. When you feel that internal tug of unworthiness, does it lead you back to love? Or does it isolate you in doubt? God is never the one who pulls you away from yourself. He always leads you back to your purpose, your people, and your place. You were not designed to quietly fade. You were designed to reflect His light in a way no one else can. So next time you hear that quiet whisper questioning your worth, pause. Ask it where it came from, because the truth, you still belong here, and God's voice will never tell you otherwise. Exposing the strategy of the enemy. Here's something we rarely talk about. Spiritual attack doesn't always look like catastrophe. Sometimes it looks like disappointment. Quiet, prolonged, strategic. You start to feel like nothing's really working. You keep showing up, but doors remain closed. You pray, but it feels like silence. You love, but it's not returned. Slowly, subtly, your hope starts to shrink. This is not random. This is not just life being hard. This is targeted, because the enemy doesn't always come at you with destruction. He often comes with distraction, making you believe your place no longer matters, your presence no longer impacts, your story no longer fits. He knows that if he can convince you that you don't belong, you'll start to pull back. Not out of rebellion, but out of resignation. And that's all he needs, for you to step just far enough back from the table God prepared for you that you stop reaching for what's yours. But here's what God says. I see it all. I see the discouragement you didn't tell anyone about. I see the fatigue behind your smile. I see the way you're still trying, still hoping, even in silence. You are not being benched. You are being built. The quiet seasons are not punishment. They are preparation. The soil is being shifted under your feet for what's next. The pruning isn't rejection. It's refinement. Because the fruit ahead of you requires deeper roots now. You haven't been forgotten. You've been hidden. And hiddenness isn't the end of the story. It's where the next chapter begins. So don't mistake this stillness for abandonment. It's actually where God is doing His deepest work. You still belong here. And the fight for your soul is evidence of your significance. Recovering who you really are. We live in a world obsessed with roles. We wear them like armor. Parent, provider, leader, helper. We cling to them to feel useful, seen, necessary. But over time, those roles can become masks. And slowly, without realizing it, you start confusing what you do with who you are. Let me ask you something. When was the last time someone saw you? Not for what you bring, not for what you solve, but simply for who you are? See, God never called you just to be strong or responsible or productive. He created you for something deeper. Intimacy, presence, joy. And maybe, just maybe, you've been living so long in the shadow of what others expect that you've forgotten the version of yourself that God delights in. Not the impressive one. Not the one with it all together. The one who's tired, maybe even a little unsure. The one who still turns her face toward Him in the morning. That's the version He treasures. Here's the truth. The quiet things you do, the unseen acts of love, the prayers no one hears, the moments you show up even when your heart is aching. God sees them all. He doesn't forget them. They're sacred. They carry more weight in eternity than any stage ever could. You were never just a function to Him, never just a pair of hands to do the job. You were and are a joy to His heart. Your presence alone still makes heaven lean in. So today, let that truth start peeling back the layers of identity you were never meant to wear. You are not what you produce. You are not the sum of your roles. You are loved just as you are. You are honored just for being here. You are remembered, even if no one else has said it lately. And you still belong here. The silent ache you never spoke. There are moments in life that don't leave bruises on the outside, but they still hurt. Deeply, quietly. Maybe you walked into a room full of people you loved and felt invisible. Maybe you gave your time, your ideas, your heart, and were met with silence. No thank you. No recognition. Not even acknowledgement. Just the cold air of being overlooked. And so, without even meaning to, something in you adjusted. You told yourself to be smaller, to speak less, to not need so much. You tried to be wise about it. You called it maturity. You labeled it discernment. But it wasn't always those things, was it? It was grief. A slow, sacred grief for the parts of you that were never seen, never celebrated, never invited to be fully present. And God saw all of it. He saw the way you kept showing up, still serving, still loving, even while parts of you dimmed in the background. He saw the quiet endurance you lived through, not because you were trying to prove something, but because you simply didn't want to give up. That ache you carry, it's not pride. It's not weakness. It's your soul remembering that it was made to matter. We weren't created to perform, but we were created for connection. We were wired to feel like we belong, to be part of something, not just useful to it. God doesn't call your longing selfish. He calls it sacred. He's the one who placed that desire inside of you, not for fame, not for applause, but for meaning. And when you were met with indifference instead of embrace, He wept with you. You never stopped longing to belong. You just stopped expecting it. But He hasn't stopped expecting you. So if today you're still walking with that old wound tucked behind your smile, know this: God saw the cost. He still sees the cost. And He calls it holy. Because the way you kept loving through silence, that mattered. The way you stayed soft when the world told you to harden, that mattered. The way you gave, even when you felt empty, that mattered. And it still does. You're not being pushed aside, you're being prepared. Sometimes we mistake quiet seasons for abandonment. We assume that if we're not in motion, if we're not in the spotlight, then we've somehow missed the mark. But in the kingdom of God, hiddenness isn't punishment, it's preparation. Think about David, alone in the field, tending sheep, forgotten by his family, invisible to the world, but not to God. Think about Moses, exiled in the desert for 40 years. No platform, no influence, just obscurity and God's voice. Think about Mary, living in a small town. No fame, no followers, just her faith and a promise that would change the world. You are not the exception to this sacred pattern. God often does His most powerful work in quiet places, not because He's hiding you, but because He's forming you. Deeply, slowly, gently. Maybe you felt disconnected lately. Maybe your prayer life has grown quiet. Maybe you've wondered if your worship has lost its voice. But God sees the flicker in your soul. He sees your heart turning toward Him, even in whispers. And He's not looking for your performance. He's looking for your openness. The season you're in, it's not wasted. It's not off course. It's not meaningless. It's the space where roots go deep, where noise fades, where strength is born, not from adrenaline, but from trust. You don't have to understand everything right now. You don't have to see how it all adds up. You only need to say yes, again. Not a loud yes, not a perfect yes, just a real one. Because healing begins in the soft places. Restoration starts with small surrender. And this season you're walking through, it may look like stillness, but it's soil. Soil where something sacred is already growing. When inner healing becomes outer movement. We often think that healing looks like a dramatic change, a new job, a clean slate, a perfect breakthrough. But most of the time, healing starts quietly. Like a breath you didn't know you were holding, finally released. Like a morning when you open your eyes and the heaviness isn't as strong as it used to be. Sometimes the greatest miracle isn't that the circumstance changes, but that you do. You begin to see differently. You begin to pray again. Not because you should, but because something in you genuinely wants to. You find yourself hoping again, cautiously, yes, but honestly. And you realize you're not trying to get back to who you were. You're becoming who you really are. That shift, that's what God is doing. He's not recycling your past. He's renewing your soul. Doors you thought were closed are starting to creak open. Not all at once, not with fanfare, but quietly, as if heaven is saying, you're ready now. Ready not because you have all the answers, but because you finally know who holds them. You don't need to push your way in. You don't need to prove your worth again. You've already been chosen, and now you're being positioned. This next season isn't about striving. It's about alignment. It's about saying yes to things that resonate with your healed self, not your desperate one. God isn't just working behind the scenes. He's working within you, building something true, deep, and durable. So if today feels like nothing's changed yet, don't dismiss it. Resurrection always starts in the dark. It begins before it's visible. You're not waiting for a miracle. You are in one. You still belong. And everything you're becoming now, it's what the next chapter has been waiting for. It's not starting over. It's coming home. There's this pressure we all feel to begin again with force, to prove that we've bounced back, to show the world that we're okay, strong, capable, unshaken. But what if your next chapter isn't about beginning again with noise, but returning with peace? We spend so much of life performing for approval, for belonging, even for God. We think that if we pray more, do more, say the right things, check the right boxes, then we'll be qualified again. Then we'll feel worthy again. But God's invitation isn't performance, it's presence. He's not asking you to return to who you were. He's asking you to come back to the center, to the place where your soul meets His Spirit without striving. You don't have to chase peace anymore. It's already inside you, waiting to be remembered. This season isn't about rebuilding your life from scratch. It's about realigning, adjusting the rhythm, relearning how to breathe. And sometimes that begins with the body. Have you noticed how you've been carrying yourself lately? Maybe your shoulders feel heavy. Maybe your breathing has become shallow. Maybe your schedule keeps filling, but your soul feels emptier with each passing day. God isn't just healing your heart, He's realigning your life. He's inviting you to care for your physical body as an act of spiritual devotion, not through guilt, not through pressure, but through compassion. What if your walk with Him also looks like drinking water before you're dehydrated? Taking a nap when your spirit is weary? Saying no simply because your peace matters more than your people-pleasing? That's not laziness. That's worship. You don't have to earn your belonging. You just have to live like someone who knows they're already held. You're not starting from scratch. You're starting from a place called beloved. And that changes everything. Rest is not a luxury. It's sacred. We live in a culture that celebrates exhaustion. Burnout is worn like a badge of honor. Being constantly busy is treated like success. And rest is often labeled as weakness. But in the eyes of God, rest isn't failure, it's obedience. Before sin even entered the story of humanity, rest was part of the design. On the seventh day, God didn't collapse because He was tired. He rested to show us how to live. And yet we fight it. We ignore the signals. We silence the fatigue. We override our need to pause, thinking we have to earn rest, as if it's a reward, not a right. But here's the truth. You were never called to hustle yourself into the ground. You were created to be whole. And wholeness doesn't come from non-stop motion. It comes from returning to the rhythm of grace, a rhythm that includes sacred pauses. Can you remember the last time you rested? Not just physically, but fully? When your soul exhaled, your mind slowed, and you didn't feel guilty for not producing. That kind of rest is holy, because it's in the stillness where God often speaks the clearest. It's in the silence where your heart remembers the truth. You are already enough. This kind of rest isn't just a break from work. It's the soil where joy grows. Not the kind of joy tied to success or applause, but the quiet kind, the kind rooted in belonging. So if you've been running on fumes, if you've been bracing instead of breathing, let this be your invitation. Stop, not forever, just long enough to remember that you're not a machine. You're a soul, and your soul doesn't thrive on pressure. It flourishes in presence. God isn't asking you to be impressive. He's asking you to be real, to slow down enough to feel His nearness again. You don't have to prove your way into peace. Just receive it. And maybe today that starts with doing less, so you can finally be more. Letting go of the mask you were never meant to wear. Over the years, we all pick up roles. Strong one, dependable one, the one who doesn't need help, the one who always shows up. At first, maybe they were survival. Maybe they even felt holy. But somewhere along the way, they stopped feeling true. It's not that those parts of you weren't real. It's just that they weren't the whole story. You were never just the fixer, never just the provider, never just the steady rock everyone leans on. You're a soul, fragile, fierce, flawed, and full of light. And somewhere beneath the roles, beneath the performance, beneath the version of you that learned how to survive in order to belong, is the real you. The one who laughs freely, the one who worships without needing it to be productive, the one who feels deeply without hiding, the one who doesn't need to earn love because you already know you're loved. That's who God sees, always has. But life has a way of layering masks over that version of us. Disappointment, pressure, people-pleasing, they all pile on. Until one day, you wake up and realize you're not sure who you are anymore without the roles. And that's exactly where God meets you. Not to shame you, but to set you free. He's peeling back the layers, not to expose you, but to bring you home to yourself. To remind you that your worth was never tied to what you could fix, carry, or control. It was tied to the fact that you were made in His image, and He doesn't make mistakes. So today, if you're tired of pretending, if you're exhausted from performing, if you're hungry to be known, start here. Let Him love the real you, not the curated one, not the spiritual one, not the always smiling one, just you. Because the truest transformation doesn't begin when we change our behavior. It begins when we remember who we are and live like we believe it. You are not what drained you. You are not what others needed you to be. You are what God formed in secret, loved before time, and is still restoring piece by piece. You don't have to wear the mask anymore. You're already enough. The breath of God, a sacred rhythm. So many of us live by to-do lists, by timelines, by 5-year plans, and constant alarms. We chase clarity like it's the only way forward, believing that if we just figure everything out, then we can finally feel safe. But God never promised that His guidance would come through a spreadsheet. He said it would come through His presence. What if divine direction is not something you map out, but something you sense? You know that moment, the quiet pull in your spirit, the deep breath that settles your soul, the whisper you almost miss if you're moving too fast. That's where He speaks. Not through loud commands, but through gentle rhythms. The breath of God doesn't sound like pressure. It sounds like peace. But here's the challenge. Not everything that feels urgent is actually sacred. And not every voice in your head deserves your trust. Some ideas rush you. Others shame you. Some even sound spiritual, but they stir up anxiety, not alignment. Discernment isn't about figuring out every outcome. It's about learning to recognize what carries the weight of God's peace and what doesn't. It's like walking through a crowd of opinions and recognizing one familiar face, the one that doesn't need you to prove anything. That's the face of love. That's the tone of the Spirit. God's breath never rushes you toward burnout. It never manipulates you with guilt. It leads with stillness, confirms through inner rest, and affirms what aligns with love. So how do we learn to follow it? By slowing down long enough to notice. By practicing the pause before the push. By tuning our attention, not just our intentions. His breath is not just air, it's wisdom. It's presence. It's your compass when everything else feels like noise. If you've been waiting for a clear sign, maybe it's this: breathe again. And in that breath, let your heart be retuned to the rhythm of heaven. You don't need a perfect plan to move forward. You just need to move in step with the one who holds you. Walk in love and presence. In a world addicted to hustle, even love can start to feel like another task on the list. We think we have to do something grand to matter, launch a project, build a platform, fix everyone around us. But the kingdom of God doesn't measure greatness by visibility. It measures it by obedience, even the quiet kind. Sometimes the most powerful thing you'll ever do is show up with kindness when no one's watching. Sometimes it's staying soft when the world hardens. Sometimes it's forgiving when no one apologizes. God sees that. He sees the small cup of water you offer, the long, silent prayer you pray, the effort to keep going when it would be easier to shut down. These are not minor things. In heaven's economy, they are acts of deep trust. And here's the thing: when you pull away from the chaos and return to that sacred stillness with Him, you start to remember. You remember who you are. You remember that you were never defined by output, but by presence. You remember that being loved by God is not a reward you earn, it's a truth you carry. You begin to walk again, not in fear, but in love. Not in control, but in communion. This walk isn't always fast. It isn't always seen, but it's real. It's rooted. It's holy. And the more you live from this place, the more you recognize that your ordinary moments, folding laundry, making dinner, texting a friend, they can all be sacred. They can all be worship. You belong, not because of what you do, but because of who He is. And in His presence, nothing is wasted. Every step you take in love matters more than you know. A new sign. The season has shifted. Change doesn't always announce itself with fireworks. Sometimes it arrives quietly, like the first breeze of autumn or the soft green sprout breaking through winter soil. But if you're paying attention, you know, something has shifted. The heaviness you've carried is starting to lift. The fog is beginning to clear. You can't explain it fully, but deep down, you sense it. God is doing something new. The doors that once slammed shut, they're creaking open. Not because you forced them, but because the time has come. Not your timing, but divine timing. And that matters more than you realize. When God moves, it's never rushed, but it's always right. He hasn't forgotten the promises. He hasn't lost track of your prayers. The waiting wasn't wasted. It was preparing you for this moment. And now, as you stand at the edge of something new, it's not about striving harder. It's about stepping forward in wholeness. You're not beginning again from brokenness. You're beginning from a healed place, a place of deeper roots, quieter confidence, and anchored hope. This is not the old you trying again. This is the true you walking forward, restored. So pay attention to the signs, the stirring in your spirit, the alignment of opportunity, the unexpected peace. These are not coincidences. They are confirmations. The season has changed, and God is not just opening doors, He's walking through them with you. Let go of what was. Say yes to what is becoming. You don't have to understand everything to trust the shift. You just have to believe that when God begins something, He finishes it, not in fragments, but in fullness. A new rhythm, breath, not tension. Have you ever noticed how your body tenses up the moment life feels uncertain? The shoulders tighten, the breath shortens, You brace yourself, preparing for a fight, a failure, or the next thing on your endless list. But what if you were never created to live like that? You weren't meant to move through your days clenched, anxious, proving your worth through performance. You were made to live in rhythm, not pressure. God's invitation is not to achieve more, but to abide deeper. He doesn't call you to success. He calls you to presence. When the world tells you that you need to go faster, do more, hustle harder, heaven whispers something different. It says, be still. I am with you. And that stillness, it's not laziness. It's alignment. It's a return to the original breath, the one that formed you in the beginning and still sustains you now. It's in that sacred rhythm where your soul breathes again, not because the noise has disappeared, but because you've stopped dancing to it. You're tuning into a higher frequency, one where your worth isn't decided by deadlines, but by design. You begin to realize that the goal is not to climb ladders, but to walk in step with the one who holds the blueprint of your soul. Every inhale becomes a reminder you are held. Every exhale, you are enough. Even in the mundane, sipping morning coffee, folding laundry, sitting in traffic, you can remain connected to that quiet pulse of divine companionship. This is not about checking out of life. It's about showing up from a place of peace. Because when your pace aligns with His presence, tension releases. Fear quiets. Clarity returns. You are not late. You are not lost. You're just being reminded that God is not in the race. He's in the walk beside you. And maybe, just maybe, success isn't about how much you conquer, but how fully you show up to what's already yours. The breath of today, the grace of now, the God who never left. You don't need to push your way through this season. You just need to breathe. You belong and you are deeply loved. So here we are, not at the end of a message, but at the threshold of something deeply personal, a quiet realization that you don't have to earn your place in the story. You never did. Before you ever performed, proved, or produced, you were chosen. Known, loved. You don't belong because of what you've done. You belong because of who He is, and His love never changed. Even when you doubted, even when you drifted, even when you broke, you were never erased from His plan. Your name was never crossed off. And now, as you breathe in these words, maybe you feel something rising. Not pressure, but peace. Not performance, but presence. This is your permission slip to lay it all down. The masks, the hustle, the fear of being too much or not enough. You are already enough. You are already home. The next chapter of your life doesn't require striving. It asks for trust. It doesn't demand control. It invites surrender. God is not asking you to impress Him. He's inviting you to walk with Him, slowly, honestly, wholeheartedly. And every step forward now is not about fixing it's about living from the fullness of who you already are. You're not just welcome here, you were created for here. So breathe, beloved. You still belong. You always did, and you always will. Whisper of love from God. Have you ever felt like you're all alone in the world? Like no one sees your tears or understands the silent storms inside you? Maybe it's in the quiet of the night, when the noise dies down, that the ache in your chest feels the loudest. If that sounds familiar, I want you to lean in for a moment. because this message is for you. There's a voice that's been calling you, not in anger, not in judgment, but in love. A love so patient, so unwavering, that it has never left your side, not even once. This is the voice of God, and He wants you to know right now, in the stillness of your heart, I have always been here. I have always loved you. Even when you questioned your worth, even when life pushed you to your knees, even when the people you trusted turned their backs, God didn't. He's been there in every breath you've taken, watching over you not like a distant ruler, but like a father who treasures his child. Maybe you've been carrying fears about the future, your job, your health, your finances, your family. Maybe rejection or betrayal has left a wound you can't explain to anyone else. And maybe you've told yourself to stay strong, but deep inside you're tired. Friend, God sees all of it, and He's not just watching. He's reaching, not with demands, but with comfort. Not with rules, but with reassurance. Not with guilt, but with grace. He whispers, don't be afraid. I'm still here. My love is bigger than your fears, stronger than your struggles, and more faithful than anything this world can offer. This isn't some poetic metaphor. It's a truth that's been proven in countless lives. The world may tell you that strength comes from doing everything on your own. But God says, come to me, rest. Let me carry what's been weighing you down. You don't have to earn this love. You don't have to perform. You don't even have to speak fancy prayers. Just bring your heart with all its cracks and questions and let it be seen just as it is. Because God's arms have always been open. And right now, they're open for you. So as we begin this journey, I invite you to pause. Breathe. Let His presence surround you. Let this be the moment you remember. You've never truly been alone. You are seen. You are valued. You are deeply, fiercely loved. And this is just the beginning. Hearing His voice, the return to peace. Have you ever found yourself in a room full of people, yet still felt completely alone? Sometimes the noise of life isn't just the clamor of traffic or the hum of conversation. It's the relentless noise inside our own minds. Thoughts that spin endlessly. Worries that refuse to quiet down. Guilt that keeps replaying past moments like an old movie we can't turn off. In those moments, it's not uncommon to wonder, where is God in all this? But what if I told you, His voice has never stopped speaking? It's just that we rarely take the time or find the space to listen. God's voice is not like the world's. It doesn't shout over us. It doesn't demand attention like a commercial break or a headline. Instead, it comes in the silence, in the stillness, in the quiet places we rarely enter anymore. You don't need to climb a mountain or chant ancient phrases. You don't need to impress Him with your words. All He asks is that you show up with your heart open, raw, unfiltered. That is enough. Maybe you feel like you've been too far gone, that God is disappointed or distant. But the truth is simpler and far more beautiful. He has never moved. We have. But He waits patiently, like a father standing by the window, watching the road, hoping today is the day His child comes home. To hear His voice, we must become quiet enough to receive it. That might look like turning off the phone for 10 minutes, or stepping outside at dusk to breathe, or sitting on the floor beside your bed with your eyes closed, simply whispering, I'm listening. Because when we listen, we realize that God isn't just speaking to us, He's reaching us. And what does He say? He says, you're not forgotten. I know the ache in your chest. I see the tears you don't tell anyone about. I'm right here. And suddenly we begin to feel something unexpected, peace. Not because everything in life is fixed, but because for the first time in a long time, we are no longer trying to hold it all together on our own. In a world that praises busy and drowns us in noise, peace is a radical act of trust. So today, will you be brave enough to choose stillness? To listen for the voice that doesn't condemn you, but calls you by name? Because once you begin to recognize that voice, everything changes. light in the darkest night. We all have a darkness we avoid. Sometimes it's buried grief or silent shame or a memory we wish we could rewrite. Other times it's simply the ache of loneliness, of feeling that no one truly understands us, even when we smile and say we're fine. But here's what God wants you to know. He sees even what you hide. Not with judgment, not with anger, but with light. There's a quiet miracle in knowing that the places we work so hard to keep hidden are the very places God steps into first. When He shines His light into those corners of our hearts, it isn't to expose us in shame. It's to remind us that we are safe, even in our brokenness. That we don't have to pretend. That we don't have to carry it alone anymore. I remember a night I sat in my car, parked in silence after a long day, feeling like I couldn't take one more thing. My heart was tired. My mind was anxious. And yet, in that stillness, I sensed something shift. Not a lightning bolt, not an angelic choir, just a quiet thought that whispered, I'm here. I've always been. That was enough. God's love doesn't promise to erase the night, but it promises to light a path through it. Like a lantern in the fog, it moves with us, step by step. His love becomes a shield, not the kind that prevents struggle, but one that absorbs the weight of it. You may be walking through something now that feels impossible to name out loud, but you are not abandoned in it. There is no darkness so deep that His light cannot reach. What would happen if you believed that? If you allowed yourself to trust that even the most painful chapters of your story are being held in sacred hands? The enemy loves to tell us we're alone, that our pain is unique, that no one would understand. But God knows. He knows the secret battles you fight, the silent cries you release into your pillow, and He is not intimidated by your despair. Instead, He draws nearer. The truth is, your scars are not a sign of defeat. They're proof that you've survived. And with God, survival isn't the end. Transformation is. So let the light in. Let it touch the parts of your soul you thought had gone cold forever. He's not afraid of your night, because He is the morning. Unconditional love, the kind that never lets go. In a world obsessed with perfection, it's hard to imagine a love that doesn't ask us to perform. We're used to earning everything: love, approval, opportunity. We dress up our brokenness, we filter our flaws, we hide the mess. But with God, there is no stage, no applause required. His love is not based on what we do. It's rooted in who we are, His creation, His child. That's why it's called unconditional. You might have been raised in a home where love had strings attached. Or maybe you've spent years proving your worth in your relationships, your career, your image. Maybe every time you made a mistake, someone pulled away, so you started pulling away from yourself too. But God's love isn't like that. He doesn't flinch at your failures. He doesn't retreat when you're weak. He sees beyond the mask you wear and loves you as you truly are. Imagine that for a moment, being fully known and still completely accepted. That's the freedom God offers. And here's something we rarely hear. Loving yourself is not arrogance, it's alignment. Because when you start to see yourself the way He sees you, something shifts. You treat your mind with more kindness. You give your body rest. You speak to your soul with gentleness, not shame. That's not selfish. That's sacred. Because how can you love others well if you constantly reject the one God handcrafted? Self-care isn't a trend. It's a spiritual act of honoring your design. When God calls you beloved, He means it, and He wants you to believe it. This love is the kind that restores not just your spirit, but your dignity. The kind that reminds you, you were never meant to live at war with yourself. So start today. Look in the mirror and speak life. Forgive yourself. Feed yourself truth, not criticism. Rest, not guilt. You are not a project. You are a person deeply loved, intentionally made, eternally valued. God's love is not transactional. It's transformational. and it's available now. No contracts, no tests, just grace, freely given, never revoked. So breathe, let it in, let it stay, because this love isn't leaving. Not now, not ever. Forgiveness and new beginnings. Forgiveness can feel like one of the most beautiful words and one of the hardest to believe. Most of us carry something, a moment we regret, a word we wish we could take back, a decision we made when we didn't know better, or when we did and still chose wrong. And for so long, we think we have to pay for it. That somehow, we need to prove we're sorry enough, good enough, different enough. But that's not how grace works. God's forgiveness isn't a prize for perfect people. It's a gift for the broken, for the ones who whisper prayers with trembling voices, for the ones who can't forgive themselves, but dare to hope that maybe, just maybe, He still might. And here's the truth that's often hard to accept. You don't have to earn it. Forgiveness doesn't come at the end of your effort. It comes at the start of your healing. Not when your hands are clean, but when your heart is honest. God looks at you, not with a checklist, but with compassion. He sees not only what you've done, but also what hurt you were carrying when you did it. He sees the confusion, the fear, the humanness. And still, He says, come. Think about that for a moment. Would you accept a friend back into your life if they hurt you over and over? Maybe not. But God's love is not like ours. It's not fragile, not fickle. It doesn't vanish when we fail. It meets us in our mess and lifts us from it. Even when you feel unworthy, God says, you are already forgiven. Let that settle in your heart, not as a cliche, but as a rescue. Yes, you've made mistakes. We all have. But your mistakes do not cancel your identity. They do not delete your future. They do not disqualify you from the love and blessing of God. He offers more than a second chance. He offers a new beginning. So the question isn't whether He can forgive you. He already has. The real question is, can you receive it? Can you open your clenched hands and let go of the guilt you've held for years? Can you stop punishing yourself for a past that Jesus already paid for? Because when you do, something powerful happens. You breathe again. You live again. You walk lighter, not because the past didn't happen, but because it no longer defines you. Grace doesn't rewrite your history, but it reframes it. And in that reframing, you're free. Destiny and divine calling. Have you ever wondered if your life actually matters? Like, really matters beyond your job title, your paycheck, or the routine you live every week. There's something deep within all of us that longs to know we were made for more. That our life isn't random. That we were put here on purpose for a purpose. And that longing, it's not selfish. It's sacred because you were created with intention. God doesn't do anything by accident. Not a leaf, not a sunrise, not a single soul. And certainly not you. Before you ever spoke a word, before you ever took a breath, He planted seeds of destiny inside you. Gifts, desires, callings, quiet passions that spark when you do something that makes you feel alive. But here's the thing about destiny. It often doesn't look like we thought it would. Sometimes it's not big or loud. Sometimes it's not a stage or a spotlight. It could be in the way you care for others, the way you listen, the way you show up even when no one sees. The impact of your calling may never go viral, but it will echo in eternity. And yes, you'll face challenges along the way. Pursuing your purpose doesn't mean life will be easy, but does mean that every struggle, every delay, every closed door has meaning. Nothing is wasted when it's placed in God's hands. Even the pain, especially the pain. Because often, it's the very places you've been hurt that become the places where you're called to bring healing. So don't dismiss your story. Don't minimize your scars. They are not the end. They are the evidence of your becoming. God will equip you for what He's called you to do. He won't call you into something and then leave you powerless in it. No, He walks with you step by step, whispering, I've chosen you. I've prepared you, and I will guide you. It's not too late. You haven't missed it. Whatever it is for you, your dream, your mission, your legacy, it's still alive because God is still writing. So if you've been asking, what am I here for? This is your reminder. You're here to reflect heaven in everything you touch. Your purpose isn't something you earn. It's something you embody. Let Him reveal it. Let Him unfold it. One obedient step at a time. Prayer that never goes unheard. Prayer can feel mysterious or complicated, or, if we're honest, kind of awkward at times. Like, what are we even supposed to say? How do we know if God is listening? But prayer isn't about getting the words right. It's about opening your heart. It's about connection. And it's about trust. Because prayer is not a ritual, it's a relationship. A sacred conversation between you and the one who loves you most. You don't need the perfect sentence. You don't need the right timing. All you need is the courage to speak and the willingness to believe that God is listening. And He is. Every sigh, every whisper, every tear that slips out when you think no one's looking. He hears it all, even when answers don't come right away, even when silence stretches longer than you hoped, even when you feel like giving up. He is still there, still listening, still working. Sometimes the answer to our prayer doesn't show up in the form we expect. Sometimes it's not a loud yes or a clear no. It's a growth, a transformation, a shift inside us that prepares us for something greater. And sometimes the miracle isn't in what changes outside of us. It's what changes within. Through prayer, we begin to see differently. We see others with more compassion. We respond with more grace. We love more deeply, forgive more freely, live more intentionally. Prayer opens our spirit to the divine rhythm of heaven. And that rhythm teaches us that prayer isn't a last resort. It's a lifeline. It's how we realign when the world pulls us off course. It's how we refill when life drains us. It's how we remember that we're never alone. So yes, pray when you're hurting. Pray when you're grateful. Pray when you're confused, exhausted, hopeful, empty, joyful, or numb. Pray for your friends. Pray for your enemies. Pray like someone who believes the universe bends to the whisper of your voice. Because it does. God never ignores a sincere heart. Even if you think you're not spiritual enough, strong enough, or steady enough, He's not asking for perfection. He's asking for presence. Just show up. That's all. Because every time you pray, heaven leans in. Inner transformation, becoming from the inside out. We talk a lot about changing our lives, setting goals, fixing routines, starting over. But true change, the kind that lasts, doesn't begin with a to-do list. It begins within. God is far less interested in how you appear on the outside than in what's happening quietly, unseen, in your heart. While the world applauds image and accomplishment, He gently asks, will you let me reshape your soul? Because transformation isn't behavior modification. It's heart renovation. It's letting go of the lies you believed for years, the ones that told you you're not enough, not lovable, not redeemable. It's allowing God's love to untangle what fear has twisted, to heal what shame has broken, to soften what life has hardened. And yes, it's slow. It doesn't happen in an instant. But think about this. A tree doesn't grow overnight. It takes root in silence, in darkness, before it ever breaks the surface. And that's how God works in us, deep, patient, and powerful. Sometimes the change starts in the smallest moments, like the choice to forgive when bitterness feels easier, or the decision to speak gently to yourself when your inner critic screams loud. It's in the act of choosing hope when despair has always had the last word. These aren't minor decisions. They are sacred revolutions. When you let God shape your inner life, you'll start to see something remarkable. Your outer world slowly begins to reflect your renewed spirit. You respond differently to stress. You find peace in places that once only held anxiety. You begin to treat others and yourself with more compassion, more patience, more depth. This isn't about becoming someone else. It's about becoming who you truly are, who you were created to be before pain, fear, or failure tried to rewrite your identity. And here's the beautiful thing. You don't do it alone. God doesn't just hand you a mirror and say, "Fix this." He steps in with you daily, gently saying, "Let me take that. Let me guide you. Let me strengthen you." You don't have to clean yourself up to come to Him. Come as you are, and He'll do the rest. This transformation is not cosmetic, it's eternal. So today, ask yourself, what are you holding inside that needs to be surrendered? What habits, what thoughts, what regrets are taking up space meant for grace? Let Him in. Let love do what only love can. Because no therapist, no book, no habit tracker can change your life the way God's Spirit can change your heart. The promise and the perseverance. We all love promises. They give us hope, something to hold on to, a reason to keep going. But in between the promise and the fulfillment, there's always a waiting room. That's the part no one posts about. The in-between. The silent stretch of time when it feels like nothing is happening. Or worse, like things are falling apart instead of falling into place. And yet this is where God does His deepest work, in the waiting. He isn't slow like we think of slow. He's strategic. He's preparing you, stretching you, growing you in places you didn't know needed growth. Maybe you've been praying for years, for healing, for reconciliation, for provision, and maybe you're tired of repeating yourself. Maybe you wonder if it even matters anymore. It does, because God is not deaf to your cries. He is not indifferent to your tears. He hears them all, and He responds, not always in the way you imagine, but always in the way that's best. The problem is we want microwave miracles, but God tends to work like a gardener. You plant, you water, you wait, you believe, and then, in His time, the harvest comes. But here's what matters most. You don't give up. You keep praying. You keep walking. You keep showing up for your life, even when your heart feels heavy. Because that persistence, that quiet courage to keep trusting, it's powerful. It moves mountains in the spirit long before you see results on the surface. Faith isn't always loud. Sometimes it's simply getting out of bed one more day believing the promise is still true. And yes, you may fall along the way. But God doesn't withdraw His promise when you stumble. He simply says, "Get back up. We're not done." So if you're in the middle of the waiting, don't lose heart. The promise still stands, and the one who made it is still faithful. The sacred surrender, a covenant with God. At some point in the journey, we all reach a crossroads, the place where we realize, I can't do this in my own strength anymore. And that's not failure. That's the beginning of surrender. You see, surrender isn't weakness. It's not waving a white flag in defeat. It's placing your life into the hands of the one who can carry it better than you ever could. It's saying, God, I give you my plans, my fears, my dreams, all of it, even the pieces I've hidden. It's a sacred covenant, a heart-to-heart agreement between Creator and creation. Not a transaction, but a relationship. And in this surrender, something sacred happens. You stop striving. You start breathing again. You begin to live not from anxiety, but from alignment. You discover that life with God isn't just about avoiding mistakes. It's about walking in purpose, in peace, in partnership. When you surrender fully, He doesn't just guide your steps, He restores your soul. He brings healing to wounds you forgot how to talk about. He revives dreams you thought were buried forever. He breathes life into relationships that felt lost. It's not magic, it's mercy, and it's available every single day. Maybe no one taught you what surrender looked like. Maybe all you've known is survival. But God wants to do more than just help you survive. He wants you to flourish. That doesn't mean everything becomes easy, but it does mean you never walk alone. He walks beside you in every season, in joy and in grief, in clarity and in confusion, in victory and in rebuilding. So here's the invitation, lay it down. Whatever you're holding too tightly, give it to him. Your future, place it in his hands. Your past, let him redeem it. Your heart, let him guard it. Because when you live from surrender, you live from strength, not yours, but his. And that strength will never fail you. This is what it means to walk in covenant with God, not in religion, but in relationship. One day at a time, one yes at a time, one quiet act of trust that says, God, my life is yours. The everlasting promise, you are never alone. Sometimes when the world feels loud and your soul feels tired, all you really need is this one truth. You are not alone. It sounds simple, maybe even too simple to believe. But that's the foundation of God's message to us, not wrapped in religious jargon, not hidden in unreachable theology, but spoken in the quiet moments of your heart. I am with you. Always. God doesn't abandon you when you fall short. He doesn't keep score of your failures or shame you when you feel weak. He doesn't walk away when others do. In fact, it's often when you feel most broken, most forgotten, that he draws the closest. The promise of his presence isn't conditional. It doesn't depend on your perfection, your performance, or how well you pretend to have it all together. It rests entirely on his love, and that love is constant, unfailing, and eternal. You may have gone through seasons where it felt like your prayers were lost in the silence. Maybe you've wondered, where was God when I was hurting, when I was grieving, when I was drowning in questions with no answers? But what if I told you he was right there, not always moving the storm, but steadying your spirit in it, not always changing your situation overnight, but sustaining you through it, not fixing everything instantly, but promising to never leave your side as you walk through it? You see, God never promised life would be easy, but he did promise you wouldn't have to face it alone, that no matter the darkness, his light would never go out, that no matter the detours, his purpose would still stand, that no matter the distance you thought you drifted, his love would never run out. He's not waiting for a better version of you to show up. He loves you now here as you are. And that love, it's stronger than every fear, deeper than every failure, and more faithful than anything this world has ever offered. So what does that mean for your life? It means you can breathe again. It means you don't have to carry it all on your own anymore. It means every morning you get to wake up not in fear, but in hope. It means your past is not your prison, and your future is not built on your own strength, but on his grace. And it means that no matter what you face, loss, rejection, change, uncertainty, there is a hand reaching for yours. Not to control you, but to guide you. Not to shame you, but to steady you. Not to use you, but to love you. Friend, the story of your life is still unfolding, and the one writing it has already promised a good ending. So as you take your next step, whether it's bold or trembling, know this: you are held, you are seen, you are endlessly loved by a God whose promise has never wavered. This is not a nice idea. This is your reality. You don't walk alone. You never have.